right, ladies and gentlemen, Big Paul and Chewbacca Uncircumcised here. We had to send out the search party for Dr. Todd. He's probably still asleep. He is a creature of the night, so
he needs
it might just be us today. Todd might still be asleep. So I'm going to run my intro to tell you not to do stupid stuff and pay tribute to my advertisers, and we'll get with this in just 1 second. Warning, this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. This video is brought to you by First Detachment Nutrition. Battle tested, expert formulated. Use discount code AB10 at checkout for 10% off. All right, we found Dr. Todd. I was wondering if we had to send out the search party, Todd.
No, the first detachment? No, you didn't have to send out the first detachment.
the first detachment?
And I couldn't find the shaker cup, and it was in the dishwasher. And it's like, I never washed these, so I never thought to look in there.
Would your girl do it?
Well, someone did it, and it's like, the funny thing is the dishwashers only ran once a week, so it's almost like it's in a penalty box, or like it's useless to stick something in the dishwasher if you're not going to run the dishwasher. It doesn't just make it clean or prevent the rest of the house from being dirty.
It completely grosses my girlfriend out. I use the same cup and the same plate over and over and over and over
I do the same thing. I'll die on that hill. When you eat 6 meals a day, like every two goddamn hours, like what sense does it make to dirty 6 plates and 6 forks? You know, just making unnecessary work for yourself.
And then I wonder why I get food poisoning.
Well, I rinse it off between uses. I don't know. Am I alone here?
Sometimes I do that. Sometimes
sometimes you roll the dice.
It's a very complicated thing trying to explain to people why we're so dirty. It's like let's say I'm using chicken and rice and I'm cutting, and I can actually eat food. What the fuck am I going to wash that pan for multiple times a day?
Yeah, no.
Or the stovetop or the countertop. It's just like they don't clean a kitchen in a restaurant multiple times a day. You clean it once before you go to bed, and then it's clean when they wake up in the morning or whatever. But throughout the day, or if you don't want to deal with it, you just put all your food in a blender and drink it. And then someone's gonna bitch that you don't clean the blender between every use. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? How much rotten in 2 hours?
It's something that we're never gonna understand about women. Like it's the same reason why women like flowers. They just like things to be nice and look pretty, you know. Like, and that's just that like for me, I don't know. It just doesn't compute. I'm working on it.
Well, man, like you have no artwork to your left. It's just this blank wall.
I do have artwork. But it's not mine. It's my wife's.
Right, but
my camera's just like.
I think that the Chinese call it feng shui when it's a positive energy that drives good joss or luck in your direction, and when there's bad feng shui, it's called poison arrows. I guess it sends negative chi in your direction. So it's like having just a blank wall with nothing on it. It's supposed to like upset someone's wa, which I think wa means inner peace.
Man,
how I know all that shit, but
I mean,
man, after I got divorced, I had nothing in here, no couch, no pictures, nothing, man. And my girlfriend's like, this is just like, it's like a sanitarium in here, just plain white walls. Doesn't that bother you? And she's like, you never open your windows or your blinds either. And I'm like, I don't know. She calls me the blind mole rat because I always keep everything. I like it cold. I like it dark.
Live in a cave.
Yeah, that's exactly how
I've been sort of man who lives in a cave. I don't know what you'd call that.
Cold. I was called a crab. Like I would basically just find corpses and drag them in my cold, wet, aquatic cave. because it'll just be cold and dark in my room, and there'll be plates with rotting food in it. So like this just looks like a serial killer or like a carnivorous, not carnivorous, but man-eating bear.
I'm terrible with cleaning too. Like I know it horrifies people about the cleaning. And my girlfriend's like, wouldn't you feel better if your house was clean? And I'm like, I'm not going to be on my deathbed wishing that I had cleaned more. I'm like, damn, man, I should have mopped the floor that Sunday back in March 2015.
Yeah, right before you croak.
Right before I croak.
Oh, I wish I had used that pine salt.
So my idea, or at least I've read it somewhere, I don't know if this is true. A lot of people find evolutionary biology racist or something like that, but the concept is the reason why women like it clean was because before there were clothes, if women got a urinary infection, then they wouldn't be able to bear kids at all. Oh. So that the women who were hyper focused on cleanliness, they were able to have more living offspring, and then their kids would live more because they were clean. And so therefore, the women who had the predisposition towards anxiety around dirt were the ones that lived and also produced the most kids. So that genetic trait of being anxious around dirt was passed on.
Well, they would have been sanitary until they got a hold of my dirty ass. I'm terrible. All right, should we take some questions?
Yeah.
What do we got here?
Got a few good questions coming in. Probably start with the most important question that I've seen from Joey DeSantis. Colin, why do you like diet soda? Seriously. Diet soda is the best. I get most of my hydration from diet soda because I'm terrible. I can't even drink regular water. If I'm drinking water, I gotta put the fucking flavor in it. You know, Crystal Light, or like, I'm cheap. I buy the generic Harris Teeter brand. It keeps me sane.
I learned the other day that how Todd hydrates is with fruit punch flavored chicken shakes.
Yeah, that's two great tastes that go great together. That's for sure.
Is that like fruit punch flavored, Todd?
Mm-hmm. Just like Mom used to make.
The fruit punch flavoring.
Can we have the strawberry chicken slurry tonight, Mom? It's my favorite. No, I don't want pizza or chicken nuggets. Give me that slurry.
Dude, I love pizza and chicken nuggets, but it's not going to get the job done.
Yeah, it doesn't love me. That's a problem.
You know what's funny is, like, I'll drink the fuck out of sugar-free Cokes and Coke Zeros and stuff like that on contest prep. And then I'm in the off season, I have zero desire for it. I guess it's some sort of weird craving I get. I'll drink like 5 or 6 Coke Zeros a day sometimes on contest prep, and now it's just all water, just plain old water. Coffee. I'll have some coffee too.
Well, I think when your blood sugar's high, you don't crave sweets like when your blood sugar's low.
Yeah, that's true.
And so the diet pop still tastes sweet.
Absolutely, yeah. You eat like a sugar dessert and then drink a diet soda. It tastes like you're drinking just it destroys all the sweetness of the diet soda. So that's a good point.
Well, that's why I was in a panic when I saw that erythritol study that it might cause blood clots, because I was like dumping that shit on everything during contest prep.
Yeah, I stick with aspartame. That's my jam.
Oh man, erythritol is great until I learned that it might kill you.
I don't know. What did you make of? I didn't even bother with the study because I just roll my eyes at those things.
I had a guy on that was a research scientist, and he broke it down. And it's like one of those things. Like he went through the study with me, and it was pretty neat that I didn't realize that there's a metabolic pathway when your blood sugar is running high, that it will actually, as a way of dealing with it, to pull things down, your body will actually start making its own erythritol. So the study didn't differentiate whether or not it was consumption of erythritol or if it was just diseased people that were cranking out erythritol. So clearly erythritol, at least what it would see, erythritol levels in people was a marker for increased clotting, but it wasn't clear whether or not it was from erythritol consumption or they were just diabetic.
Well, what population do they test? Did they test death's door humans?
Yeah, well, I mean, that was the whole study. They went through and tested sick people to see if they could find any underlying factors that maybe they'd missed out on. They weren't even looking for erythritol, from what I understand, the researchers. They were just looking for increased markers that were common amongst that population that they had missed. And then
So
they did us.
Even if it was erythritol consumption, if you picked 1,000 people that had 1 foot in the grave and erythritol pushed them in, that doesn't mean that a healthy person who eats erythritol would have any health consequences. It's the same thing we saw with something else relatively recently, where all the people that were 1 foot of the grave got pushed in, but everybody that was perfectly healthy just had almost no symptoms or no symptoms.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, from what I took from it, one, they need to do further study, and I wouldn't worry about it that much. I mean, the levels of erythritol that these people had in their system were pretty freaking high. But it wasn't established whether or not it was from erythritol consumption or just some sort of natural process of increased erythritol from their diseased state. They did test the clotting on rats, and it did show that it was pretty scary. Like it was like a 9-fold increase in clotting with erythritol. I don't remember what the erythritol levels were, but at a certain threshold of erythritol, it was pretty significant. Like a clot was, I think, 9 times what they would expect it to be with that normally. It was pretty scary. But from what I took from it is that there's not a whole lot to be worried about right now. I was sort of in a panic at first because shit, I mean, dudes are pounding that stuff on contest prep, energy drinks, protein bars, and then using Truvia, which has erythritol in it. It's stevia in erythritol.
Well, what's funny is, yeah, that's what always irritated me was that the stevia products didn't have stevia. They had erythritol, which is a sugar alcohol, I believe, and I avoided sugar alcohols because of GI distress.
So, yeah, there's the whole shit your pants factor into it too.
The fucking sodas with sugar alcohols are like goddamn Witcher potions. You can take like, only so many before they become like too toxic to bear.
You're allowed 2 monsters per day after that. It's diarrhea.
The fucking worst. Yeah, that's why I just stick with aspartame personally.
Just the white.
I can pound them.
Yeah, I mean, like from my understanding, Splenda is completely safe. Aspartame causes brain damage if you eat 100 times your body weight with a day.
I'm working on it.
And then like the ACE K is supposed to be pretty toxic in large doses. And erythritol, I just assumed it wasn't. I always avoided sugar alcohols, period. And so the actual stevia leaf extract tastes like shit. So
it's really bitter.
It's not great.
Yeah, they market stevia, but then it's not stevia you're really getting, it's erythritol.
Yeah, it's like 80% erythritol.
So for people who are color coded, Colin likes the pink. I like the yellow.
I also like
the
blue.
With the green. Oh, you also like the blue? That's Ace K. So you like anything that'll do harm to you, and then
potentially. I love all the things that are trying to kill me. Those are the best things in life.
Like if I ever order a coffee, I put 1 pink, 1 blue, and 1 yellow in there, and then
taste the rainbow.
I don't want to be racist about my sweeteners. I want to include 1 of each color.
When it comes to non-nutritive sweeteners, Todd doesn't even see color.
I'm inclusive.
Yeah. All right, what do we got next, guys?
All right. How about an actual question? What are some of your favorite foods or snacks to have on high-low days? Recently been using honey jelly for my high days to help hit my macros, and it's been way easier. Keith Summerall.
I mean, on my high days, I've been doing a lot of fruit juice. Like I've been eating fruit more. I've been staying away from the trashy processed foods. I will have one serving of breakfast cereal just because I'm a child, but I had Captain Crunch I put up the other day, and oh my god, people were freaking out. Do you know that's got red dye number or whatever in it? It's gonna kill you. I'm like, out of the things that are gonna kill me, the one serving of Captain Crunch per week is probably not it.
Yeah,
red dye right here.
Fruit punch flavored chicken shake. On contest prep, man, I my lifesaver has been pickles, man. I eat the fuck out of some pickles on contest prep. What about you, Todd?
I don't You know, I don't remember. Like, so the past year and a half, I've been in a constant off season where every day is a high day, it seems, and I've had nothing but clean food, no
Wow.
sugar, no caffeine, nothing.
It's awesome, man.
It sucks. And
Yeah, it sounds awful, but I mean, like, yeah, I mean, in terms of, you know, the benefit you're doing yourself and like the monastic dedication it takes to fucking like achieve that, like.
You used monastic in a sentence. I'll let you count. So it's like monks, it's Spartan type thing. But I used to use on high days when I worked with Justin, I used gummy bears and York peppermint patties because I had about 500 carbs worth of rice and 500 carbs worth of either gummy bears and or York peppermint patties. And what I would do is I would have my chicken and rice meal. Then I'd go sit in my chair and watch TV. And in the chair, because it's a Queen Anne chair, I had gummy bears on one side and then the peppermint patties on the other. And I would just alternate those until my next meal. So it was like a bridge of the gap. So, you know, I'd shoot insulin, eat my chicken and rice, sit down in the chair when I'm tired and dizzy and just pound as much sugar as I can until I had the energy to get back out of the chair. Then I'd go eat another meal. You know.
My issue with the gummy bears, and this is a real struggle, is the jaw pump. And you get that, man? Like I'm like, oh my god!
You were using the Haribo, the Nazi bears from Germany. If you switch to the Albigensian, which is the Satan worshipping bears, where they're all sitting in a circle like this, trying to summon the demon of flavor, then what do you call it? The Albigensian bears, they're way better. Way better. But the thing is, it causes a lot of stomach acid. That even though they're softer, they burn you. So you could have hard bears that hurt your gums, or you could have soft bears that burn your stomach.
I mean, like the demon summoning bears, it makes sense that they burn you. Yeah.
And there's Black Forest, which is funny because the term Transylvania means across the forest, and they're referring to the Black Forest because the Black Forest is where all the creatures from the Brothers Grimm lived, like the wolf, the witch from Hansel and Gretel. So there's actually a brand of bears called Black Forest bears. So they're basically, it's also from Germany, but they're organic and natural. And so it's kind of like a nightmare forest bears are actually the most expensive bears, but they taste the best, they burn the least, and they're the softest. So if you got the mummy, you can get bears that don't hurt your gums and don't burn your stomach.
I knew on the end of prep, man, I was getting shredded because I could see striations in my jaw muscles when I was chewing gummy bears. I had jaw muscle cuts.
You know, when I say to people who are texting on a machine, I walk up, kind of like, "Can I use your chair as workout equipment?" You know, it used to be when they're on the phone. You know how they got their earbuds in and they're on their phone and they're talking, but they're sitting on the equipment. I was like, "Hey, after you do your set of jaw, can I get a set of back in?" You know, because they're running their mouth, not lifting.
Todd winning friends at the gym.
Well, if you say it with a smile, they laugh. If you know, it's like
you missed that whole conversation the other night, Colin. We were talking about Todd offending people and the difference between text and in person.
That's a dangerous game to play. I've definitely failed here and there myself.
I have pushed send on a few emails I probably shouldn't have.
If you're like me, you've written up some like entire like paragraphs and then just been like, all right, delete.
yeah. Oh no, I do that all the time.
They're not ready.
Usually on.
By the time I finish typing, like they no longer deserve the smoke. Like, delete.
Usually on Instagram, it's my response to some asshole on Instagram. I type out some big elaborate response, and then I'm like,
you realize like,
I'm like, nah, man,
it's not worth it.
Just block this dumbass.
Remember, it was the last one of these. That dude was insistent that I was TDD was his identity, and of course, it was an anonymous guy. That I was insistent that I was an opium addict, and then he got people buying into it. Like, I hope he gets help. There are programs, Todd. It's like, motherfucker, I got 23 years sober. It's 12 in the morning. And I've got fucking light shining in my eyes. That's why my eyes are droopy. I'm not nodding out on Heron. You know.
What century is it? Fucking opium addict? Like what?
Like, I wish I got the good stuff and just OD'd on fentanyl already. Then I wouldn't have to stick to this chicken shake diet. That's insensitive. I apologize to all those people that lost loved ones from unintentional fentanyl overdoses. I'm not trying to minimize your pain. I'm just find it very strange that anyone would jump to the conclusion that I am on opiates because my eyes are droopy.
Man, this went a long way from snacks on high days.
I mean, that's gonna happen.
All right, what's up next, Colin?
Let's see here. We got one for Dr. Todd from Cava Time. Can you discuss lipid values and danger zone readings in lipids? Also, do skewed readings mean plaque is being laid down?
I mean, that's kind of, yeah. So let's see, discuss lipid values, danger zone readings. So you want your LDL around 70, you want your HDL over 40. And if your HDL gets lower than 40, you may have elevated LDL. If, for instance, you have a low HDL, but you also have a low LDL, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're at more risk of plaque formation than someone with an equal LDL. Although people will disagree with me, they'll say that it's the ratio that matters. And that may be true, but I'm unaware of anyone that had any cardiovascular events that had a low cholesterol rating just because they also had a low HDL. So do skewed readings mean plaque is being, nothing is 100% medicine. That would be nice if it was, but that generally if you have high LDL, you will have more plaque in your arteries. The way to test that is a calcium score, which is a type of CT that measures how much calcium is in your arteries. The theory is that if the plaque is there long enough, it'll become calcified and hard, kind of like bone. And that's what the point of the calcium CT score is. I've had low HDL for over a decade, sometimes as low as single digits, and I have a 0 calcium score. But I've also never had an LDL higher than I think 80. So that's why, and I'm not alone in this, I'm probably the exception because I've been eating a low fat diet since I was 8 years old. I've never really had high fat in my body. And I've also, if I ever eat more than, let's say, 100 grams of fat in a day, I start getting sick on it. So I've always had very, very low cholesterols, the HDL and the bad ones. And as a result, I don't have calcified plaque. So I would suspect that if you were on an appropriate diet and everyone in your family had some bizarre lipid values, that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll all have plaques in your arteries. Some people just have naturally low HDL or naturally high LDL, and that it doesn't affect them in a negative way. But if, for example, you went on gear, because of the context of this podcast, if you went on gear and your HDL went in the toilet and your LDL went through the roof, you might be laying down plaque, and it may not show up on a calcium CT score for a couple of years.
Man, I can never get my LDL below 100. Maybe at the end of contest prep, that's it. But I like it just like it's always like 120, 130, and my calcium score, I just had one done. It was 0.
And now, have you always been like that, even pre-gear?
Ever since I was a kid.
And
everybody in my family has high cholesterol.
Then that's a perfect example of someone who has familial high LDL without any history of cardiac issues in themselves, or has other people in your family needed stents or anything like that?
Nope.
All right. So you've got a perfect example right here of someone who has what medical science would not include, like an outlier that isn't that rare, that is all the time. The best example I can give people is you hear smoking, you think lung cancer. And that's because almost everyone who has lung cancer smokes, but very, very few people that smoke get lung cancer. But they're never going to tell you that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I just like I've been on and off cholesterol medicine since I was in college, Todd. And I was 170 pounds when I was in college. It's not like I was some big dude. I was playing basketball, running around.
They try to treat the lab value, but ignore the patient and their lack of symptoms, right?
Yep. Yeah, I remember I had like a really bad issue with statins. Like they just made me cramp up and have all kinds of issues.
Which didn't. And the funny thing is that the hospital does that intentionally. I think I brought this up before. It
Yeah.
might have just been to Dave, Blue Collar Bodybuilding, in a phone call or something. But the way you're taught is to treat the 90%. So if 90% of people react in a certain way to a certain pattern, like you see this blood work, you treat with this medication 100% of the time, it will help 90% of people. It will be not beneficial, but not harmful to 5%. If it kills 5% of people, even if all 100% of those people sued, we'd still make a profit. So do it anyway.
That's
So
nuts.
that it is not supposed to be where the doctor makes a decision based on the big picture and the entire patient. That's how it's practiced in every other country in the world. And that's how non-United States medical schools teach. But everyone thinks that the US med schools are better than other med schools and that the doctors they get from other countries are inferior, when it's the complete opposite. Because in the United States, the pharmaceutical companies write the medical school's curriculum, and the hospitals and the pharmaceutical companies and the insurance companies all work together, so that there's just this cookie cutter approach to treating everyone, that they order the same blood work. They look for anything out of line. As soon as something's out of line, they medicate that, regardless of anything to do with the patients as an individual. And the idea is you'll make the most money that way. And then if people die and sue, that the profits you generated will eat those losses. That's why all doctors have malpractice insurance.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not shocked at all.
By medicine for humans should not be profit driven. Like, when you come from a place of like, before all else, we want to make money at this, like, you're gonna eventually put a price on human life, and I don't think that's cool.
Which is
all right.
All the time now.
Anyway,
What do we got next here?
We got Emperor Sheev. Any benefit of essential amino acids?
Is that the Palpatine?
Yeah, with shades.
That's awesome. I think that essential amino acids are useful, particularly intra-workout or post-workout, or if for whatever reason that the protein volume is too great, you can mitigate some of that with some EAAs. That the idea is, if a leucine spike is between 2 and 3 grams, depending on your body weight, basically like 1 gram per 100 pounds a person, is leucine is requisite to induce the mTOR cascade, and that mTOR cascade perpetuates, and theoretically some carbohydrate bolus, which should reset that, which is what it does for GH. But the EAS, it's found in your food. But if you can only eat, let's say 4 ounces with 5 grams of EAS, in theory, that's the same thing as 5 ounces, but it might be more anabolic than, let's say, 6 ounces.
Yeah, I mean, I use them in my intro. That's the only time I use them. I've heard of people using them during cardio, like fasted cardio. Didn't you used to have me do that? Or I think at one point.
I don't remember. I know that there's 2 schools of thought about it. Supposedly, the fat burning cascade is blunted if you do anything other than like just caffeine and water. However, how much are you preserving by actually having some EAAs on board? For example, the Wrath diet pill I have that has HMB in it, which is a specific type of leucine that's better for muscle preservation, whereas leucine's better for activating the mTOR pathway. So some HMB pre-fasted cardio would probably be the most efficient way to preserve muscle while still trying to maximize fat burning. But in the most part, because amino acids cause some insulin to be released, there is going to be some fat burning blunting from using EAAs. So to me, it's more important that you don't lose any muscle than you optimize fat burning. So priority 1 is don't lose muscle. Then priority 2 is optimize fat burning. Versus I think the way everyone else looks at it is priority 1 is burn fat. Priority 2 is grow muscle.
Mm.
And it's like, well, a pound saved is a pound earned. What's the point in losing 3 pounds of muscle during prep and then building 5 pounds of muscle in the off season?
Yeah.
When you could have burnt nothing during prep and burnt 4 pounds of muscle in the off season, you'd be up a netted 2.
Yeah, I've been in the camp of burning muscle before. It's not fun.
in that vein of thought, we've got from Johnny Cabral thoughts on fasted cardio. Many studies say it doesn't matter fasted versus fed, but most top athletes all do fasted cardio.
Yeah, this is something that is kind of irritating to me because, as usual, the scientists are not looking at the actual population. So if you took 2 drug-free athletes that are doing nothing at all, then they're just not going to make a difference. But if you're taking into consideration someone's going to be doing GH and Clen and L-carnitine and possibly a tiny drop of insulin, according to Alex Kikal, before fasted cardio, then the amount of improvement on the partitioning of the fat burning goes so deep towards fat burning and so little towards glycogen and muscle, then it definitely makes a difference. That's why I made Wrath of the Valkyrie, was so that I could connect all of those other elements together by adding T2, adding L-carnitine, adding green coffee extract, and all those other things, synephrine, that isn't there because the beta-2 agonist is bound by the Clen, and the T3 upregulates the mitochondrial speed, and the GH helps liberate fat. But then the other ingredients that are in most diet pills are also useful. So I took all the clinically maxed out doses of all the effective things to help bucket brigade the fat from the fat cell to the mitochondria, and then decrease the efficiency of the mitochondria burning fat. So you had to burn more fat to get the same amount of energy. And that's why I think fasted cardio is more efficient, is if you are properly using the correct drugs. Just like you take drugs before you go lift weights, you would take drugs before you do cardio, and they're different drugs. Well, some of them, there's some overlap, but for the most part, they're different.
It's awesome.
I mean, it's just been my anecdotal experience. And I know everybody talks about net energy balance, but it does seem like fasted cardio works better. All right, what do we got next? I mean, there are not a lot of steroid questions today. I'm kind of disappointed.
All right. Well, here we got from Mad Dog underline 94. Hey guys, after a blast, how long would you want an athlete to have their health markers in range before you say they're ready to push again? What if they were never out of range to begin with?
So that's a great question. So my opinion, and surprisingly, Victor Black came up with this one independently of me, is rather than just blasting and cruising and like basically abusing drugs, hurting your body, doing damage, then having to come off completely to let it sort of repair, then repeating the process. Why not just raise your dose up to the point where you're still safe, but underneath that threshold where shit hits the fan, and just stay there long term?
Makes perfect sense to me.
And so I found that for years of practice, trial and error, is no matter what compounds or what ratios or combinations I use, 1400 to 1500 seems to be the sweet spot. And this time I pushed up a little bit all the way up to 2100. And that while I went back and looked at my blood work, it looked like as I went above 1500, it slowly, my ALT got higher than my AST. And the more that the ALT pulled away and got higher than the AST, the more the HDL went down. And without any symptoms or changes, but it basically tells me that either the tiny dose of Anavar is taking pre-lift was slowly damaging the liver, or the total load of DHT, because when I was at 900 test, 400 Primo, and basically 200 Anavar, I had the best value. And then when I decreased the test and increased the Primo, that's when the ALT started getting worse. and the HDL started going down.
Yeah, I've
And
noticed that. I've noticed that too with Primo.
So I think that in the future, what I found for me, I'll probably do is instead of using because I know for sure Anavar is much harder on HDL, which is an indirect effect, right? That in theory, the reason why the HDL goes down is because the liver is damaged. And then even though the GGT wasn't bad, it was still a little higher than 20. And then 20 isn't a bad value, but it's not a good value either. I think the goal would be in the future, and because my DHT conversion wasn't higher, regardless if it was 500, 600, 700, 900 test, I still had the same DHT. So there is a ceiling effect. But as I raised my Primo, it drove the equation so that it increased the DHT conversion. So that it looks like I could run maybe 900 test and maybe 600 Primo year round and have the best health without having to push the envelope.
You know what's crazy is when you had me running those high dose nandrolone only cycles, Todd, or when we worked on those, my blood work was spotless on those.
Yeah, people don't realize nandrolone only is easily the best way to go. But if you don't have the estrogen, you don't convert the GH to the IGF-1. So I always think it's so strange how many people I see that are using testosterone but not GH. And it's like you're running on one leg. There's no point to doing the test without the GH because the point of the test is the estrogen and the point of the estrogen is the GH. And there's some person who's going to freak out and say, that's not true. Estrogen's good for, and they'll list all these things that they read, but I'm confident they've never tried it. They've never actually tried an androlone only cycle, checked their blood work, had low estradiol, and had zero side effects. Because everybody who doesn't want to do the nandrolone only cycle is because they've read that there are these side effects associated with nandrolone, and they don't realize that's because you're mixing nandrolone with testosterone. If I mix nandrolone with testosterone, I get gyno within days. If I just do nandrolone alone, I can run 200 NPP or DECA a day, and I have no gyno whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, I was running, I think, 1 gram of nandrolone a week by itself. No side effects, man. I felt great.
Yeah.
All right, what do we got up next, Colin?
We've got it's an interesting puzzle here. Atif Khan, Ramadan nearly here. For a natural, how can you save muscle mass during this phase? A fast that will start at 5 a.m. till 7 p.m. No food, no water.
I would probably just stick to, I mean, like meat, like, and this isn't supposed to be like I'm some know-it-all, but like I like Lebanese food. So I'm assuming you're in the Middle East and this is a ubiquitous dish. Like shawarma, like lamb shawarma would probably have, if you ate that, that's going to be some slow digesting, high fat source of meat that would probably take up to 24 hours to digest. So if you're having lamb or like whatever, you could have chicken and hummus, whatever, but mixing protein and fat would have the slowest digestion and would be constant, steady state of insulin and blood sugar so that you wouldn't have highs and lows. You wouldn't be tired throughout the day because you're waking up. The other thing I would do is if I was in Ramadan and I was in this, I would go to bed at 4:30 and then I'd wake
That's what I was going to say.
At like 4 p.m. Then I would go do fasted cardio and take a shower. And then my first meal starts at 7 p.m. Like that would be the most logical thing to me. And people would be like, well, that defeats the purpose. And I was like, but then at that point, that's when I'm like, I don't understand the whole point of it. Are you observing Ramadan because you truly believe? Or are you observing Ramadan because there's a social pressure that you have to conform to your environment? Otherwise, you'll be socially snubbed. And so if it's one of those things where if you're the easiest hack for this is just sleep when you're supposed to be fasting.
Yeah, I have one of my clients. That's what he's doing. He's sleeping during the day and then staying up late.
That's cool.
Yeah, he's a programmer, so like I guess it doesn't really
used
matter.
To it.
It doesn't really matter when he works. So
yeah.
He's working at night and doing his food and sleeping during the day. So
Yeah, but if you let's say you had to be up, you've got kids, the kids wake up at 6 a.m., you're fucked, and then they don't go to bed until 7 or 8. So at 7 p.m., you eat some big meal with your family that's lots of lamb or chicken and hummus or whatever, slow digesting protein and fats. And then ideally, obviously, the chicken and hummus would be better as far as the cholesterol profile, but not as good from an anabolic profile. Because remember, pro-inflammatory foods build muscle, but they also damage arteries. So basically eating a lot of slow digesting food at 7 p.m. And I guess you could also wake up at 4:30 and have some big ass breakfast. That's kind of the same thing. And I would stay the fuck away from carbs because you're not going to grow muscle like this. You might as well burn some fat, but you don't want to lose any muscle. So you'd want really slow digesting protein that take a good 12 to 24 hours to digest.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, a bunch of fat, protein, maybe vegetables. Yeah, I mean, that would probably be the way to go.
And digestion dependent. Like for me, like I said earlier in this podcast, 100 grams of fat is the upper limit for me as far as digestibility. So that's only 900 calories. So
yeah, I'm getting to the point now where if I have a high fat cheat meal, oh my God, man, it's blows. Like I'm messed up for a couple days.
Yeah. I can't. As you get older, your intestines start to die, just like your face gets wrinkled, and you can't digest things as efficiently. So you have to stick to easier foods. But I would think like 300, 400 grams of protein and 100 fat. That right there is going to be 2,500 calories. If you mixed in a little bit of carbs with that, whether it's from the chickpeas and the hummus or whether it's like rice, vegetables, whatever, even like 25 and 25 each meal. Like if you had 200 grams of protein, 50 grams of fat, and 50 grams of carbs in one sitting, that's a lot of fucking food. You knock that out right before bed and right as soon as you wake up, then you're looking at 400 grams of protein, 50 fat, and 100 fat and 50 carbs, or 100 carbs. That's going to put you at 2,900 calories. And that should be enough for someone like me to stay on my feet without being super hungry all day when I'm supposed to be fasting.
Yeah, it sounds like a good plan. All right, what do we got next here, Colin?
I've got one here from Peter Shitakov. If I use 2, 3, 4, 5 IUs of GH, I get very bad tunnel syndrome. But if I use
tunnel,
6, I think he's saying his wrists hurt. But if I use 6, everything is okay. He wants to know why.
Zero sense.
Yeah,
it
seems
depends. It depends. So the U.S. pharmacy grade GHs put mannitol or other diuretics snuck into the formula so that you don't get the edema, because the only real side effect of GH is water retention. And so patients don't know that what they're experiencing is water retention. They notice that it is the one symptom they're experiencing, like, oh, my blood pressure's up, or oh, my feet are swollen, or oh, I've got carpal tunnel. They don't realize that's all water retention. It's just where do you notice the water retention first? So in this case, there's either a response where he's building up so much sodium that once he hits a threshold, his body's like, all right, and releases whatever hormone, I forget at the top of my head, that causes you to release sodium, the opposite of aldosterone. So it sheds water at a certain point. Or he's using GH. And so he's got so much going on that by the time he hits 6 unit, the dose of diuretic that he's using is so high, it's actually the diuretic effect is greater than the water retention effect. Or was using the cheap GH, and then he started to add in the expensive USGH, that last unit, and that last unit had enough diuretic to then shed the rest of the water.
Interesting.
For example, if I used 8 units of USGH, I'll tear a muscle from being so dry.
Mm-hmm.
So what I found was, and if I go over 8 units of Chinese GH, I'll have water retention so bad that I can't close my hand to pick up a dumbbell. So what I found was a good balance is going 6 units of Chinese GH and 2 units of American GH. And that the diuretic amount balances out so well that you can go up to now 8 or higher if you're balancing the US GH with the Chinese GH.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Is it ADH that's the no? It's not ADH that's the opposite of aldosterone, is it?
ADH, I think, is antidiuretic hormone.
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is very similar.
Similar, yep.
Yeah, I was never great with that part of water balance stuff.
All right. Got one here from Chad Coles for Dr. Todd regarding my liver health. My ALT is 150. My GGT is 29. Cause for concern.
Simple answer is yes, especially if the ALT is significantly higher than the AST. So if your alk phos is normal, it's probably not the orals that are doing it. It's probably your total gear load. If the alk phos is high, it's probably orals that are doing it. Yeah, that's pretty much the gist of that. Ideally, we want the ALT to match the AST, and you want the GGT below 20.
When do you get concerned about ALT, AST? I mean, at what levels?
But in myself, if I'm about 200. So I know that if I'm training really hard, like hard, high intensity training, not even high volume, and I was on 1500 and I was at 104 and 104, like precisely matched. And then during the whole Mike Erythritol phase where I was doing higher volume, but still training to failure, I think I got my ALT crept up to 168, but my AST went down to 95. What that tells me is that the training is the AST. The training plus the gear load is the ALT.
Okay. Yeah, man, I remember after contest prep one year, my ALT and AST were both up in the 300s.
I've had that too. But at the same time, my glucose was 40. And we probably didn't get an ESR or a CRP. So we have no idea what your total inflammation was at that time either.
I had a client, I think I told you about this, that was running DHB, and his ALT and AST were both over 1,000.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So there's this whole thing, is DHB actually liver toxic or not? From what I've seen on blood work, I would say yes.
Wow, that's nuts. Yeah, I think the only times I've ever seen really bad scores with me was when I took the orals crazy the last week of prep. Because usually my peak week, I almost double my gear load and throw in halo most years. So, the blood work is that my load is completely different 4 weeks out than it is the peak week in the past. And it's just the wrong way of doing it, but that's how a lot of people do it. And that's how I've done it many times. And most of those times, my organs were just a complete shit show. And then this most recent time, kind of went on a drug and diet and lifting break going into the show. And my blood work became perfect. I was a little bit softer the day of the show than I was 2 weeks out. So there's got to be some mitigation in the middle. Like there was a right way of doing it and it was overdone, but it was good for the blood work.
I'm just looking at my most recent blood work to see where my AST was 33 and my ALT was 83.
So 33 AST and 30, and what do you say, 83 ALT?
Yeah. Which
still isn't that bad, but like how many days off did you take before you went and got the blood work drawn from the gym?
One.
All right.
Yeah.
And you're also not taking more than 1 or 2 sets to failure though, right? You're not doing your 12 sets to failure, even though you're doing 12 sets per body part per week.
I mean, we train pretty hard, I think. I don't know. Colin trains with me. I mean, my definition of failure is probably different than what somebody else's definition is. My GGT was 14.
Yeah, it sounds like it's good blood work. I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, and then my C-reactive protein was like almost nothing.
What was it?
Hang on, let me find it. I'm looking at it. I'm just curious. Where is it? I can't find it now. I don't know, man. I can't find it. Yeah, I had my cystatin C checked too. It was good.
Like 0.8, 0.9?
It was right at 1.
Okay. So you probably have like an 83 GFR.
Yeah, it was in the 80s. They have this new thing. If you go on a Kidney Foundation website where you can go in and plug in your...
You can plug it all in. Your creatinine, your
weight,
it's a
your
little bit
height.
over my head. Some of the things on there, like the APC score, I wasn't sure what that was.
Yeah, the weight, height, all that stuff. And it kicked me back at over 100 with all that factored in. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't put in my height and weight. I just put in my creatinine and then... Not my creatinine. I put in my cystatin C and then looked at it like that. Like it looks like 0.8 to 120, 0.9 to 100, and 1 is like an 83. Just a quick and dirty value, GFR estimation. But yeah, you can get more specific. You can include your creatinine. I wouldn't include someone's creatinine if they lift or if they eat a lot of meat or if they use creatine, because that's going to skew that value. And the reason why we're using cystatin C is because the creatine is not valid anymore.
Yeah, there's my C-reactive protein. It was 1.1.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's low.
After contest prep, it was high.
Right. Mine was 5 this most recent blood work. And I had 4 days off from gear and from lifting. And I went in and I still had a 5 C-reactive protein.
Yeah, when I had Lyme disease, it was crazy. It was in the hundreds.
Okay.
Yeah, it was nuts. All right, Colin, what do we got next?
We got one here from Michael McAdam. What do you guys think of when carb cycling and using metformin, insulin, and MK677 as a poor man's GH as can be more sustainable year-round? I honestly... a little confused by the phrasing of the question.
I think I get what he's saying.
Okay.
Yeah,
he says if you want to have a safe year-round protocol, the use not abuse model that I talked about earlier, that can you use carb cycling with metformin to keep your insulin sensitivity good, and then on your high days using insulin and using MK677 before bed instead of purchasing GH because it's cheaper. Because the theory is that GH is going to cause insulin resistance. So he's prophylactically taking metformin, which I don't think you're going to need metformin to handle MK677, because MK677 is going to be at most 2 units of GH equivalent, probably more like 1. And then he's using the insulin to clear the glucose on the high carb days. That's what I think he's saying.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, he only gets 100 characters, so there's not a whole lot that they can give us in these questions. Yeah, I think sounds like a good plan. That's pretty standard. I mean, that's pretty much Justin Harris style approach, except we would use real GH instead of MK677.
Yeah, he likes doing the high days with insulin, just 2 days a week, so you're not blowing out your insulin sensitivity. I mean, that's kind of his whole concept.
Mm-hmm. No, another way of interpreting this would be if he meant using Lantus and metformin every day, and just the carb cycling had no bearing on the situation. I think even that would be fine. I think using Humalog pre and post training every day, or using high doses of insulin every day, even when you're not on a high day, and using medium days, is probably suboptimal.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what do we got next, my man?
Got one here from Austin Simmermaker. When taking berberine, do you take it before the meal, after the meal, or during the meal?
I split it up in multiple doses. It's got a really short half-life. I don't know how you do it, Todd, but I usually split it up in 3 doses throughout the day.
You know what's funny is I never knew the dosing and the timing on berberine. I always assumed it was basically poor man's metformin. And metformin you take before bed, and
Yep.
your second dose would be in the morning. And I don't know what the half-life is on metformin. I'm pretty sure it's like less than 12 hours. And I don't know what the half-life is on berberine.
It's 5 hours.
5 hours is berberine's half-life?
Yeah.
So you could probably take it 3 times a day.
Yeah.
Meal 1, meal 3, and meal 5, and that's probably enough.
Yeah, the way I've been doing is I take the metformin before bed, and then I split the berberine up. I do 500 milligrams at meals 1, 3, and 5.
All right.
That's how. I mean, that's how I've been doing it. I don't know if that's a logical way to do it, but
Sounds logical to me.
Paul, I thought I heard you mention something about like taking fenugreek with the berberine. Is that...
Yeah, from what I understand, fenugreek, berberine is not very bioavailable, and fenugreek somehow helps with the uptake of the berberine. I don't. Justin was talking about it. I don't understand the mechanisms of it, but that's what I understand. Just kind of layman's explanation.
One thing I did hear was that the metformin helps lower LDL cholesterol. Now that I don't know if that means berberine doesn't, but Paul, because you have intractable LDL, perhaps if you were using more metformin instead of more berberine, you might have a better LDL.
Yeah, but I mean, possibly.
I don't know if your GI tract could handle that.
I don't get the nasty side effects from metformin like some people do. It definitely makes me, man, you have the weirdest smelling farts. That is for sure. I don't know what the hell that is, but man, there is a very distinct flavor to your farts when you take metformin, but I don't get the diarrhea from it like some people do.
I mean, to me, that sounds like it's still bad digestion, right?
Yeah, it seems to go away after the first couple of weeks or after I up the dose, and then it just settles down. It goes away.
My understanding is what it is metformin's remodeling your digestive tract.
Yeah, doesn't it?
I don't know the specifics, but that it's a temporary
intestinal feng shui readjustment.
Yeah, exactly. It's moving some stuff around, so you've got that good Josh flowing in the right direction.
That's right.
It's flowing in the wrong direction.
Fucking intestine she's all fucked up, man.
Yeah,
I mean, I know.
The idea is that the metformin, if you use it at a low enough dose for long enough, then you have perfect digestive health. And then you can titrate up the dose and it should be fine.
Yeah, and I've heard I forget who it was. Some doctor was saying that basically like metformin doesn't even really do a whole lot until you get up to the higher doses, like 1,500, 2,000 milligrams. I'm going up to 1,500, and that's like kind of the danger zone for me.
I live at about 1,000, but I like it. I think it's just a medicine that makes me feel better. I don't know. Am I crazy for saying that?
Well, it's funny if a doctor says it doesn't do a whole lot until you hit 1,000 to 1,500 milligrams, you have to wonder, like, who are they talking about and what are they talking about? Are we talking about obese people who have terrible diets and their glucose management? Or are we talking about as a prophylactic protective measure against the inflammation caused by anabolic steroids? Because our population is going to use this for a different reason than the reason why it's prescribed. We're using it for an off-label purpose.
It's a good
of
point.
Insulin sensitivity and it protects against the side effects of the GH, and it protects against some of the side effects of the anabolic steroids.
It does seem like it improves body composition too. I've seen guys start it and they stay leaner, eating more food.
It's been, yeah.
And then this negative reputation it has for IGF. Again, that was based off of over 70-year-old men who weren't lifting, who were obese.
Well, my IGF-1 levels were 460 running 1,000 milligrams of metformin. So I don't. IGF-1 levels were 460.
Oh, yeah, that's really high.
Yeah.
I will say
it's probably why I get cancer all the time.
I had to start with a low dose of metformin and ramp it up. When I jumped in straight to taking 1,000 from taking nothing, it messed me up. Seatbelt for the toilet. Yeah, it was unpleasant.
Yeah, and it takes a while to ramp up, so it's hard to time it. Like, for example, I went from 500 to 1,000, everything was fine. I went from 1,000 to 1,500, and I started some oral. What's that thing that isn't DHT that everyone else was using? Not DHT, THC. There's the other one that isn't THC that everyone
CBD?
used for a while. Huh?
CBD.
That's it. Yeah. So I started some CBD at the same time as I started 1,500 metformin, and I had like really bad GI issues for a month. and I couldn't tell if it was from the CBD or it was because I finally had a saturated point of metformin and the amount I took just compounded it. And because it took a whole month to go away, it's like, how long did it take my system to get the metformin back down to a reasonable level?
Yeah.
I also had somebody tell me that the XR is not as effective as the regular metformin. I don't know if that's true or not.
Again, what do they mean by effect? You're not going to have a spike. You're going to have the area under the curve will probably be the same, but it'll be spread out over a greater time. So if they're, what is the purpose? If they're talking about fasting blood sugar, then yeah, if they take a metformin before bed and then it crushes their blood sugar so that when they wake up, it's under 120, which was what their goal was, then they're like, okay, this is effective. Or if they take the XR, it's a more accurate thing where it lowers their blood sugar a little bit, but not a lot of it. And then therefore they wouldn't have their blood sugar at its lowest point exactly when they took it. So they wouldn't see as dramatic of a change on the device that they're measuring it with.
Yeah, the XR also doesn't wreck your gut like the standard metformin does, from what I understand too.
Okay.
That's what I've heard, that it doesn't wreck your gut the same way. All right, what do we got next?
Got one here from Thor Stormlord.
Thor has an
Thor
awesome
Stormlord.
name. He's on commenting on all my stuff.
I recognize that name. I know cycle questions are boring, but I'll summarize. Lantus plus 5 IUs, Humalog pre, 300 test E, 600 Primo E, 500 Bold C, berberine every other meal, no AIs, only ezetimibe. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar.
Cholesterol med.
Don't need it.
All right, so I don't know what the question is. Opinions.
All right. He wants to know if this cycle, I guess, is good, acceptable.
Okay, I would make sure. Okay, so assuming you need the Lantus, that you're over a 90 blood sugar to begin with, then yes, that's good. I would still, if you want insulin sensitivity, which is what you want, you wouldn't throw insulin at the problem. You'd start with metformin or berberine, like we talked about, and exhaust all the insulin sensitivity options, then apply the Lantus. The Humalog 5 pre might help with pumps, but you're more likely to go hypo. You're probably safer if you want to build muscle going 5 Humalog post or 2 pre 3 post. As far as the 300 test, 600 Primo, 300 Boldenone, I'm assuming you're using Boldenone or instead of just more test because you're worried about DHT conversion. If you're not worried about DHT conversion, fuck the Boldenone and just use test, because the point of the test is to get the conversion to estrogen for your GH, which apparently you're not taking. And then as far as the Primo, yeah, because like if you're going to be not using GH, then you don't need all that test and Boldenone. You could just be running just straight Primo for the most part. And then normally, if you're going to use 3 agents, you're going to be using a testosterone, a DHT, and an androlone. There's no reason to use 2 testosterones and a DHT unless the reason why you're using Boldenone is to avoid DHT. He said the berberine every other meal. I still would use metformin over berberine first line. Good thing he's not using the AIs because he's got a 1-to-2 ratio of E to test to Primo. He probably would have a really low estradiol if it was.
Yeah, I would imagine his estrogen is going to be buried at that.
Yeah. And then therefore, once again, if you're using testosterone, the point is to get your estrogen as high as you can without side effects. Otherwise, there is no point to using testosterone. I'm not going to comment on the cholesterol med because that's completely unrelated to this.
Yeah, ezetimabe's gotten a lot of popularity in the bodybuilding world right now. You and I talked about it a little bit before, Todd.
Right, because it's not a statin, and because it just basically is the Olean, the wow of cholesterol. It just shit out the cholesterol.
Yeah, it works through lipid absorption somehow. It doesn't work through the liver, from what I understand.
What are your thoughts about this cycle, Paul?
I mean, I think his estrogen's probably going to be buried, and he probably feel like shit.
Yeah, to me, like, why would you use insulin without having GH? Because why would you need the insulin? It doesn't make any sense to me. So if I was to fix this, I would say 2 to 6 units of GH a day. I would be on the metformin, not the berberine. I would be on probably 600 tests, 600 Primo, and I would be doing the Humalog post lift. That's assuming you need it, but you definitely don't need it if you're not on GH, and there's no reason to be on anything that converts to estrogen if you're not taking GH. That GH should be the second drug you think of, not 1, 2, 3 anabolics, 4, 5, 2 different type of insulins, and then one type of insulin sensitizer. So you basically are on 3 different drugs for the insulin pathway. You're on 3 drugs for the testosterone pathway, but you're on nothing for GH.
Yeah, I threw up. This was a follow-up comment from Thor. I just threw it up. Yeah.
All right, then exactly. Great. Okay, and I didn't mean to talk down to you, dude. That's how my tone is when I'm thinking out loud. So yeah, 2 to 3 units of GH, and if you tolerate that, I would just go up to 6 or so, whatever you can take, because I'm a big fan of the IGF-1 pathway. As we've seen with Paul being 460, that did him wonders.
Well, my estrogen always runs high, even with I ran this last cycle. I ran 750 test, 700 Primo, and my estradiol was in the 60s.
Yeah, it sounds. I mean, you've got what sounds like perfect. Like, because your fasting glucose is bad, you're using insulin and it's working.
Yeah.
And like it makes me want to use insulin, but if my fasting glucose is within range and I start slamming insulin, I'm just going to get hypo all the time. That's not the point of it.
It's like damn near impossible for me to go hypo. I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
Well, you're on 1,000 carbs. I can't eat 1,000 carbs.
Yeah, Justin pulled me back a bit because my glucose or my A1C was a bit high.
What was it?
It was in the mid 6s.
Oh shit, that's not a bit.
Yeah.
That's not a bit high.
Yeah, I mean it was like pre-diabetic level.
Yeah, 6.3 is diabetes.
I don't know, and I may be diabetic, dude. I've never been formally diagnosed, but everybody in my damn family's diabetic.
It's not like you're a vampire. Like once you're diabetic, you're always a diabetic. It's just that it's arbitrarily set to a HbA1c of 6.3 or fasting glucose measured on 2 occasions of 126 without precipitating things driving those values such as GH. So you'd have to be off GH and eating a maintenance calorie diet and then have those values be that high.
Right.
For it to be an issue. And because we know it takes 120 days for your HbA1c to reflect what's going on, I mean, you'd basically have to be off of GH for 4 months, then retest your HbA1c. And if it's still over 6.3, then that's type 2 diabetes until it's cured, which would be just fat loss.
Yeah, it always, I mean, my family, we have the weird type 1B diabetics in my family. With the pancreatic insufficiency.
Okay, well that explains why you have to use so much insulin.
Yeah, so I think that's probably what I've got going on. Like metformin and stuff doesn't really make much of a difference.
Well, yeah, because your tissue is insulin sensitive. Your pancreas just isn't making the insulin.
Yeah, I
think why
that,
you grow so well from the insulin.
Yeah, I think that was the missing ingredient for me for a while because I wasn't growing, and then I started using insulin. But part of the reason why my A1C went up is because I'd stopped using the Lantus while I was on cruise. I just wanted to give myself a break from it, and then my A1C, it was in the 5s, and then it went up to 6.5 when I stopped using the Lantus.
I mean, the HbA1c takes a whole 120 days to really.
I mean, it was 8 weeks I was off.
You were in 8 weeks?
Yeah.
You were on a cruise for 8 weeks?
Yeah.
When the fuck was that?
I just came off of it.
Oh, cruise! I thought you meant a cruise ship.
Oh, no.
I was like, who the fuck can afford?
No.
It's like Motley Crue cruise, 8 weeks of partying. It's like bring the vodka.
I've never been on
EpiPens. I was like, who the fuck goes in 8 weeks? You're gonna have half the boat pregnant by that point.
And Todd, literal Todd.
12 kids every 6 days for the next 2 years.
No, my cruise was 125 milligrams of test, not Carnival.
Oh,
hilarious.
Dude, it's so cool that they got metal cruises now, though. I think that just like, how do we get the people that party the best and are the least violent on our boats? Because they're all old people and gambling addicts. It's like, let's get washed out rockers, and then they can't go anywhere to OD. We can control exactly how much heroin they have every day. Just like a rat with a pellet. Like they goes off in their they put their trailer on the fucking boat so that they feel like they're in their own environment, so they don't get like cage shock.
Oh, this is a good one. Do you mind if I pop this
No,
one up?
by all means. I'm ashamed to say I forgot my diaper again this week. I had to step away from him.
You can't go murder your boyfriend's paramour. All right, so I can't tolerate certain gear, VAR, NPP, EQ, Tren because of insomnia. Is this related to GABA receptor interaction and CNS stimulation? Yes. Okay, so the Tren thing, I think the Tren thing is because it decreases TBG, and so it drives up the T4 to T3 conversion. So the upregulation to T3 is the indirect mechanism of the insomnia. The NPP is supposed to cause anxiety, and EQ is supposed to cause anxiety in some people. I'm not really sure how that works. I think it was according to Alex Kiekel, the NPP causes misfolding of proteins in the brain. And that's now, according to what I saw, the study that was, I think it was a reference that I saw with John Jewett, was the nandrolones as a class, their inhibition of the cortisol, which it's called the glucocorticoid, but we know the hormone is cortisol. The glucocorticoid receptor is what prevents muscle wasting in a calorie deficient state, but also what does brain damage. Now, according to, I think it was a study, the type of brain damage the nandrolones are supposed to cause is visual spatial, but there isn't really good evidence about this. So I know that I just threw a bunch of confusing stuff at you, and I guess that's the kind of the point, that there isn't anything that's like, aha, the bad guys are in there, like in Last Action Hero, that I know that EQ and NPP have a reputation for having anxiety. And VAR is a DHT that definitely is a neurostimulant directly. So the Tren and the NPP we know inhibit the glucocorticoid receptor on the brain. We know that the VAR is a neurostimulant, and I think it's because the androgens have their own receptor in nervous tissue. I don't know why EQ causes anxiety, but I've heard that as well. And the GABA receptor is just a generic negative signal. So glutamate's the positive signal, and then GABA is the negative signal to just upregulate and downregulate the neurons in general. I'm not sure that it's on 100% of the neurons, but that's the general gist of it. And then they can convert back and forth. Kind of like GABA is neurochemistry yin and glutamate is neurochemistry yang. And so you want those to be in a state of balance, or you want you to be yin dominant when the sun's down and yang dominant when the sun's up. And that has to do with having photons enter your eyeballs. Simply getting bright light in your eyes first thing in the morning starts this differentiation towards, for the next 12 to 16 hours, I'm going to be yang dominant. And then once you're not getting that type of photons in your eyes, you're yin dominant. Now, for millions of years, we had nothing but firelight at night. So we had very dim light, which is how that worked. We were able to start to wind down and go into a parasympathetic yin state when the sun sets, because we have electronic lights that have the blue lights. That's why we're going to have insomnia as a result of using screens, whether it's a TV or a phone. That's why blue blockers are useful. Once the sun sets, you put on your blue blockers, and it's mimicking, or at least it's approximating, having the normal diurnal cycle that humans had for millions of years.
If you have a Mac,
if that's a question or not, but
if you have a Mac, they actually have a thing called night shift that'll pull out the blue light.
I've got that on my phone too. I don't think it works, but that's because I don't think anything on the Galaxy 21 works. The Galaxy 21 is just the reject phone of the whole line.
I never had issues with Nandrolone until after contest prep this past year, And then I had a couple. I'm not like a anxious person, but I had a couple panic attacks, like some pretty severe ones when I was running MPP after contest prep this year. I don't know what that was about. It was like social anxiety. Like I was like out, like when I was away from home, it just like caught up to me, and I was just like having these full blown panic attacks. And then I dropped it could have been just coincidental, but I dropped the MPP and it went away.
I mean, I don't know enough about. I should, but I don't. But that does sound like that's a pretty steep connection when you consider that it's got that reputation.
Yeah, I mean, it could also just be that everything was all fucked up from being on contest prep too. You know, there is that possibility too.
So let's see here. So PPJ, what can he use? He can use testosterone. He can use Primo. He can use Masteron, which he basically used the DHT and testosterone. And then from the Nandrolone class, I'm thinking maybe Deca because it's not such a spike. The actual shape of the area under the curve is blunter than NPP. If he had to use an Nandrolone, he could probably get away with something low, like 20 milligrams of Deca a day, which would be 140 a week. And that probably would be low enough to where we wouldn't see it. But I'm not suggesting you do it. But that pretty much limits you to the 3 remaining drugs are the 3 safest drugs plus Deca.
I mean, if you can't grow off test Primo, GH, a little bit of insulin, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, those are, if I was going to run a basic cycle and with the lowest amount of side effects, that's probably what I would do.
Yeah. I mean, if I didn't start, I started having those inflammatory reactions to Primo and test Nathate recently. So I've mapped it out. I can use Masteron and test SIP and I have no inflammation. But if I inject Nathate or Primo, I have massive inflammation.
Really?
Yeah. So I think I had a contaminated batch of Test E or something, and then that caused my body to attack all Test E molecules. And because I would load the syringe with Primo as well, it started attacking the Primo too.
That's wild.
Yes. Now I have to stick to test SIP and Masteron probably.
That's wild.
It's not a consequence I ever foresaw. I've never had bad gear in my life. The very first time I got bad gear, it's now now I'm allergic to it. So
I've heard a lot of people talk about bad gear recently. I've also heard a lot of people having reactions to the carrier oils too.
Right. And that wasn't it. That the chemist figured out exactly what it was. And I told him my symptoms. He's like, yeah, China sent me some bad raws. And that those raws went out to a lot of people. And I know the same thing happened with the compound pharmacy that I was prescribing to patients, because I know one person's stuff was recalled before they got it. And this was before. So it's not like I prescribed bad gear to anyone, but at the exact same time that I got exposed to bad testosterone, one of the pharmacies that I ordered my medication for patients through, they recalled a huge batch of testosterone.
Wow.
So they're getting the same raws as the underground labs are.
I mean, there's probably only a couple factories in the whole world that make that shit.
Right. And for the past year, I've been getting knots, not just pain, but knots from Primo. And everyone I knew who made Primo, the people who bought it had the same complaints. So I knew that it was from China. It was just it was bad Primo, and that's what everyone was using.
That's wild.
But it wasn't really bad. It was just like a little bit of like a knot that was slightly painful and would go away in 2 days. And then around the time of this, when I switched to 2100 from 1850, I switched to 2100. I started having the body part just blow up huge and be red and hot and painful to touch. So
you ever had an abscess from a shot?
Mm-mm. So I went from having a 1 out of 10 discomfort to like a 6 out of 10 discomfort. And I was doing 2 shots a day every day, and it took a couple days. So before I knew it, like my arm had grown an inch, my shoulder had grown an inch each shoulder, and it was like a huge mess. It was getting hard to train. I couldn't sleep. So I had to come off everything.
I had my first abscess from a shot last year on contest prep. I had to go get it cut open, and they drained it, and I had to go back in, and they would clean it out every day and repack it. I caught it early, thankfully, and it was MRSA too, so it wasn't like.
So it wasn't the gear; it was an contaminated batch of gear.
I know what happened is I'm a little sloppy with cleaning the site. Sometime.
Oh, you gave yourself it. Okay.
Yeah, I think I'd come home from the gym and just like jabbed myself and didn't wipe down the area first. I'm 100% sure that's because if it was bad gear, I would have had other infections.
Yeah, for I'd say at least 15 years, I haven't used an alcohol swab.
Yeah, well, I learned my lesson. I do now. That was not a pleasant process to have that wound open for like 10 days while they drained it out. Kept going every day and have that damn thing repacked and cleaned out.
Where was the abscess? In the muscle?
Yeah, it was on my thigh.
So does that hard to contract that leg now?
No, they didn't cut that big of a hole. It was pretty small. It was maybe, I don't know, an inch and a half. The hole they cut open, they just cut it open and drained it out. They squeezed, like sucked everything out of it, and then they rinsed it out. I don't know what exactly they used to rinse it out, but they cleaned it out. And then they packed it. Yeah.
They packed the muscle?
Yeah.
God. And then they pulled the packing?
Yeah, they pulled it. Like, I have to go in every 2 days, I think it was, to get the packing changed.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I kept on prepping too, man. And it was funny because I had the great show last year, but I had that happen, and then I had COVID I think it was 2 weeks before my show. And I just kept training.
Yeah, that sucks.
I'm like, I'm not telling anybody I have COVID. That's terrible. I just kept training.
Allegedly.
Well, it's kind of like, I don't know if you know who Gordon Ryan is.
Yeah.
Gordon Ryan makes these jokes like so-and-so is going to have an injury on this week because that's the week USADA shows up. You know, like, so it's the same thing with like the food poisoning thing. Whereas in what do you call it? In MMA, when someone wants to pull out of a fight because they're scared or because they're going to pop dirty, then they basically say they had an injury. It's like in bodybuilding, if you're overdosed on some drug because you or your coach made a mistake, you had food poisoning.
That's awesome.
Like, why do only bodybuilders get food poisoning the week before the show and no other time? It's like you put way too much shit. And your body just blew a gasket, and you had to go to the ER and got your blood work done, and you found out you're like that close to dying, and so you had to pull out of the show.
Well, what's his name? I saw Urs had food poisoning a few days before his show, supposedly. All right, guys, I got to wrap this up. I appreciate everybody coming on today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your questions, and peace out.